Welcome, my friend, to my metaphorical boat as I captain the ship that is about to sail through the metaphorical sea of words. You're in for a treat this week, guys, because you have tuned in to Myron's Message, Episode 5. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you do me a favor, just hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Yeah. So I'm going to just to lay out what's going to happen this week. Just to lay it out a little bit, I'm gonna give you guys a thing that I like. Oh, and I should say I'm doing this one solo this week, so I apologize for you Tristan fans out there, but he'll be back. Don't worry. So I'm gonna give you guys a thing I like, which is I had my thumb and my finger, but I'll just do this. I'm gonna give you guys a thing I like. That could be anything, but every week I'm just gonna say something. Hopefully I like that many things that I can come up with something every week. But I'm going to give you guys a thing I like. I'm going to talk about an idea that I wanted to share with you guys from a book I read. And then we're going to go into the book of James a little bit and do a little bit of a Bible study from James chapter 1. So if that sounds fun to you, I encourage you to keep watching. So I'm going to play the intro and then we will get into it. So, without further ado, Myron's Message, Episode 5. Yes. So, a thing I'm liking this week. And I want to share with you guys is the White Horse Luncheonette. Now, I know a lot of you guys go to the White Horse Luncheonette. But if you live in the area and you don't go to the White Horse Luncheonette, you're just missing out on extraordinary stuff. I mean, seriously, guys, go to the White Horse Luncheonette. It's a great place to eat. They have a great cheesesteak. I mean, some of the best cheesesteak sauce I've ever just had the privilege of tasting. It's just amazing. So if you're in the area, head over there. It's in White Horse. It's along Route 340 in White Horse. So yeah, that's the thing I'm liking this week. The other thing I want to say before I get into this into the meat of this podcast, or the before the waves start crashing on the boat, metaphorically, is this week I left my Yeti at work. And I know. Back in the first video where I was bragging up my Yeti and how I mentioned that I don't leave it at work, but it's been happening more and more. And I think this is a life lesson to us. So I have this water bottle. I don't know. I think this is some for trendy water bottle, but it's my wife's. So I apologize in advance, Twilight, but she doesn't. I don't think she really listens to this podcast anyway. She should, though. I would listen to her podcast. So, what was I saying? Oh yeah, a life lesson that we can learn from this idea. Sometimes you buy expensive things, which Yeti isn't terribly expensive, but compared to other tumblers, a Yeti is expensive. You buy expensive things, and right when you first get it, you're like, yeah, I love this thing, and you take really good care of it. But as you own it longer and longer, you start to lack in how you take care of it, how you how you treat it. Like I'm leaving my Yeti at work. I did it twice last week, and it's just not good. It's a slippery slope from there, and that can be how it can kind of be in your relationships. Whether you're married or you and your wife or when you first get married, it's like, yeah, like this is the most awesome thing ever. But as life goes on, you kind of start to neglect some things, and things just happen. So, and that it can also apply to your relationship with God. When you first, become a Christian, you get all excited about this, and then that, it gets kind of old after a while, and you kind of lead on to the next new thing. So that's something I thought about with how I'm treating my Yeti. I'm like, let's not treat our relationships with other people and with God like that, because it is easy to do. And I am guilty of that myself, just kind of taking for granted the things that are here, the things that have always been here. So yeah, what can you learn from Yetis? That's it's a good life lesson there. All right. So, yeah, I want to talk about this idea, and this comes from a man by the name of G.K. Chesterton. He was I don't know what, he did so many different things, but he was born in the late 1800s and lived until, I think he died in 1920. He has a bunch of books out, but he is pretty well known for his, I don't know if you call them prophecies, but more predictions, like, with the things that were happening in the world at the time. He said, it's going to lead to this, and a lot of those things have really come to pass in some way or another. So, very interesting man to read. And I reading his books is a little bit hard for me, full disclosure, because I'm not like an excellent reader, and it was written long ago, so the English terms are different. So I was listening to his book, What's Wrong with the World. Very good book. And G.K. Chesterton was, I believe he was a Catholic. So he was a religious man, but a lot of his writings don't really have anything to do with religion. They have a lot to do with social issues, social problems. Yeah. Anyway, I was reading his book, What's Wrong. I was listening to, sorry, not reading, because I don't have time to just read everything. But I was listening to his book, What's Wrong with the World, about maybe a month ago. And this one idea that he had kind of stuck out to me. And so he was saying this in the context of people hating capitalism and wanting socialism. And the idea was that, sometimes you need to change things. So, in that situation, people were sick of some of the bad parts of capitalism, which, believe it or not, there are bad parts of capitalism. And they were saying, well, we need to change the whole system to this thing, which is something a lot of people are saying today. And his point was, look, whenever you change something, if you change to socialism, you're going to take care of some of those problems that you were worried about, yes. But a whole new set of problems is going to come along with that. And I was thinking about this, and then there was a situation at work where I felt someone higher up in the company made a decision, and I hope nobody from work watches this. I don't think they do, but it's okay if they see this. Someone higher up in the company made a decision that helped what he wanted to get done, but it hurt me. It hurt not like emotionally, but it hurt what I was trying to do. So he saw something and he wanted to change it, but his version of changing hurt me. It caused a different set of problems in a different area of the company, if that makes sense. So I think this applies to a lot of things. When you when you want to change something in your life, just make sure that you're not hurting. It's not causing more harm. In my opinion, if we would switch to socialism, like G.K. Chesterton was saying in his book, the problems that come with socialism, I think, would outweigh the problems that come with capitalism. Now, that's my opinion. But yeah, anyway, just something I was thinking about. And you can think about it too when you make changes in your life. Like what is that change? Like, because there's no perfect way to do something. Like in the situation at work, there was a problem. And that the higher up guy that I was talking about needed to fix that problem. And he did. He did fix the problem. He got it taken care of. But in the process of fixing problems, he caused another problem. Life is kind of all about choosing your battles, is the phrase that people say. Choose your battles. And I just think that's something you need to think about, especially when you're making big decisions in life. You know, if I do this, what are the areas it's gonna affect me, and maybe it's gonna hurt me more than it helps me. Is it gonna hurt me more than it helps me? So there you go, G.K. Chesterton. G.K. Chesterton. Yeah, if you have time, read him. It's kind of hard to follow his books because he writes a lot about the what's the word I'm looking for? The situation, the culture at the time, and so a lot of it was in the early 1900s or late 1800s, you know, and so he'll mention this person, and you know, we have no idea who that person is, but people back then would have known. So you have to. It's kind of hard to follow. Now, if you're a historian, you might know all this stuff, but for someone like me who doesn't have a great knowledge of, I mean, I have the general gist of the history of the United States, but not a great knowledge of every little detail, you know, it might be a little bit hard, but I think there's a lot of good things he says. He's very quotable. I'll put it that way. Very quotable. Yeah. So I guess that part is done. I don't have really anything more to say on that. Is the change you're making affecting you in a more negative way than what's happening already? Oh, I could say this. So like when the U.S. invaded Iran, the idea was to topple the dictator that was bad. And yes, the dictator was bad. But now it's almost just as bad as in Iran with the democracy they set up. That didn't work. And so now there's a power grab. So when the U.S. toppled that dictator, there was a power grab, and then it ended up being just as bad. So that's another situation where it happened. Yeah, and I'm not that well learned in that kind of stuff, but yeah, I think that's another situation where we have a lot of wars going on in the U.S., unnecessary wars, in my opinion, because I'm just not that informed on that subject. But that's kind of the gist of things that I sense is going on there. You know, when we overthrow a dictator in another country, is the power that, and you know, we set up a democracy, is that democracy just as bad as the dictator? All right. So we're gonna do this James thing. So bear with me here, guys. The book of James, and we're just gonna go through verse 19 to 27, and I'm just gonna read this verse by verse. The book of James is one of my favorite books because of just the practicality of it, and I actually memorized the book of James back in school, so it's always been kind of dear to my heart. My son's middle name is actually James, so that's interesting. That was one of the reasons we made his middle name James, because of the book. So let me just start. We're starting in chapter 1, verse 19, and there's something in here that I want us to hear. us to think about a little bit. It's something, and the reason I say I want us to think about it a little bit is because it's something that I'm dealing with in my life. So, full disclosure, I'm not a perfect person. I have a lot to learn and a lot to, I'm not where I want to be, if that makes sense. But I just say that so you guys know that I'm not this, just because I'm reading the Bible in my podcast and showing you guys, I'm not perfect, and I want to be better. And some of the stuffs I'm gonna say in here are gonna apply directly to me, or I'm gonna be talking to myself, if that makes sense. So let's just start here in verse 19, and we'll just look at this thing verse by verse. Know this, my beloved brothers, and I'm reading out of the ESV. Know this, my beloved brother. Let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. Now let's just stop there. Let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. I don't know if you guys understand how wise that is. Quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. So I encourage you guys to, as you go throughout life and, different situations arise, whether it's work or whether it's you're at school or whatever, and, there's a situation, you get mad, someone says something and it's like, quick to hear, quick to listen to the person, slow to speak, and slow to anger. I think we would do well to live by that. And then verse 20, he's going to just build on this. For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. And there we have it again. The anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. So if you get angry, you're not going to be righteous, if that makes sense. When you're angry, you don't make good decisions. So, quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Verse 21, therefore put away all filthiness and rampant wickedness, and receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your souls. Verse 20, and this is verse 22 and 23 are ones I want to focus on here. But be ye doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. So verse 21, he tells you, receive with meekness the implanted word, because that's able to save your soul. So put away all your all the things that God doesn't like, I guess. Rampant, it says filthiness and rampant wickedness in the ESV. Put that stuff away. Receive the word, and that's able to save you. And then it goes on here in verse 22, and I just read this. It tells you, so once you've done that, once you've received the word, once you've been saved, be a doer of the word, and not only a hearer, deceiving your own selves. So, once you've received it, don't just receive the word, be a doer of it. And it says, it says deceiving yourselves. So if you're only hearing the word, you're deceiving yourself that you're actually doing something. It's calling us to be a doer of the word and not hearer only. Don't deceive yourself, guys. All right, verse 23. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he's like unto a man who looks intently at his natural face in the glass. And I'm just going to continue on to verse 24, because to finish the thought. For he looks at himself, and he goes his way, and at once forgets what he was like. So he gives kind of a example, I guess, of someone who hears the word only and doesn't do it. Kind of like a guy. He gets up in the morning. He has, some dirt on his face. His hair is a mess. He looks at himself. Looks intently at himself, studies himself. He finds all the things that are wrong with his face. Now I'm adding some stuff here, but I'm just adding it for effect. I'm not trying to change the word here. And then he looks at himself, and then he's like, I'm not going to do anything about that. And then he just goes about his day looking like that. And he knows he looks like that. And that's kind of how it is if you hear the word and you don't do it. You're like, you know what you need to do right, but you're not doing it. We'd say someone's silly for doing what they're describing in this passage here. But we do it all the time when we hear the word, when we listen to the word, but we don't do it. Let's continue here. Verse 25. But the one who looks into the perfect law of liberty and perseveres, being no hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts, he will be blessed in his doing. And so then this is just kind of bringing this point to a close here. Bring this point to a close. If you look into the perfect law of liberty, look into the word, and you continue there, and you don't forget about it, but a doer who acts, the ESV says, if you're a doer who acts, you will be blessed in your doing. So, this is something that I brought this scripture up just because this is something that I don't necessarily do the best with. Being what, it's easy to listen to, a message or read, spend time in devotions or spend time with God. And then when you're out of that, you kind of forget everything you thought about, you forget everything you talked about. So yes, spending time with God and his word is very, very important. Getting to know God better is very, very important part of the Christian life. But we should be living our life through, what we read in the scriptures. We should be living our life through like when we meet with God, we should be living our life through that. So don't be a forgetful hearer, but be a doer who acts. A doer who acts, it says. All right. Let's hop back in here. We have got 2 more verses to go, and then we'll let you guys go. And these verses are just as challenging here. If anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this man's religion is worthless. Now, it's interesting that he brings up the tongue in this passage, because in chapter 3 of James, he talks extensively about the tongue and the evils that you can cause by just with this small member of the body. But here it's interesting that he talks so much about the tongue. If anyone thinks he is religious but doesn't bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this man's religion is worthless. So yeah, he hasn't really talked about the tongue yet, but he equates. It's interesting that he says bridle the tongue, because he talks extensively about it. In chapter 3, let me just get there real quick. It says in chapter 3, verse 2, it says, if you're able to bridle your tongue, the same phrase it uses here, you're able to control the whole body. And it gives the example of a ship with a rudder. And I think it's interesting that he says, if anyone thinks he's religious and doesn't bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. So, bridle our tongue. And I think if we bridle our tongue, we'll be able to, like in verse 21, put away all filthiness. We'll be able to be doers of the word and not just hearers. All right. Let's hop back into verse 27, one more verse here. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God is this: to visit the orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. It's interesting that this is what he says religion is. It's to visit the orphans and widows and to keep himself unstained from the world. First thing he says is orphans and widows. And that's challenging. Like, how many of us actually go out on a regular basis and visit the orphans and widows in our communities and in our churches? How many of us actually do that? I know growing up that was a big thing for my parents and my parents' parents, is to visit people. You know, we would go visiting some Sunday afternoons, and we didn't, as kids, we didn't really want to, but our parents were just following the command in the Bible to visit the orphans and widows in their affliction, and then the second part of that is to keep oneself unstained from the world, and I think the KJV says unspotted from the world. So keep yourself unspotted from the world and visit the fatherless and widows. That's pure religion. So there you go. I don't have too much more to say about this. I thought I'd do that this week, kind of just break the scripture down a little bit. Just something I'm thinking about. How can we be not only hearers of the word, but doers of the word? Because I think a lot of people watching this are hearers of the word, and we do on a regular basis hear the word. You know, we go to church on Sunday, we go to, we listen to messages, we spend time with God, we read the Bible. But are we just hearing that, or are we actually doing something about it? Are we visiting the fatherless and widows, or the orphans and widows? Are we keeping ourselves unstained from the world? So that's the book of James. Like I said, I might do this some more, just to kind of do a verse by verse Bible study. I think it's kind of fun, kind of interesting. I didn't actually really study for that. So maybe next time I'll spend a little bit more time in it. And I'm not saying I'm going to do this next week or every week, but felt like I should tonight. Yeah. So I think that's everything I have this week. I'm not gonna spend too much more time in anything. So thank you everybody for entering the proverbial or the metaphorical ship with me and sailing the metaphorical sea. And we have now reached metaphorical land. And so at this point, I'm just gonna stop talking. So I'll see you guys next week. Thank you guys.